Hi, this is Marc Dresner, and this is Partnerships TV, coming to you from the 2011 Partnerships and Clinical Trial Conference in Phoenix, Arizona. Joining me today is Ira Spector. He is the Senior Vice President of Global Operations at Allergan. And Ira, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Let's dive right into this. One of the emerging trends in drug development has been the complete outsourcing of clinical development to CROs. And now these services offered by CROs to pharmaceutical companies can range from highly specialized, obviously technical capabilities, to broad capabilities in which the CROs in some cases contain the requisite skills to be a pharmaceutical company per our previous conversation. So let's talk about those requisite skills first. What are the core competencies of a drug company?
So it used to be the core competence of a drug company was the discovery, development, and production of a new therapeutic entity or new therapeutic modality. So that covers broadly both drugs, biopharmaceuticals, biotech, and devices. The models are changing, and clearly the pressures on the industry are changing that. And you know, it's probably very appropriate, since this is the 20th year of this conference, that at a conference where we talk about how sponsors can work with providers, so CROs and pharmaceutical as well as device and biotech companies, that we examine this model. Mm-hmm. And that model is shifting radically in some cases. And you know, that's both exciting as well as I think has some risk.
Yeah, certainly intimidating, and something that's got a lot of people on the edge of their seats right now. Is clinical development then one of those core pharmaceutical competencies?
So I contend that it is, and here's why. Very often clinical development is viewed as just another task because it's treated as a box. Mm-hmm. And the appeal to a CEO of a major company of someone coming in and saying, oh, I'll take that off your hands, I'll take all those people and their pensions and their health care off your hands, and I'll deliver you that box as a service for less money, is an incredibly compelling argument. Mm-hmm. And here's why I think it's wrong. It's wrong because companies rarely use clinical development as a strategic weapon for strategic advantage. Clinical development, run well, does not need to be just turn the crank, here's the task, take it from this end of the box to that end of the box. Mm-hmm. Clinical development involves the first relationships that you build with investigators, who, by the way, are prescribers. It involves the face of your company and your products to prescribers and patients. And so it has a high degree of correlation with the future sales associated with your product. And you're going to outsource that. You're going to give away that fundamental first shot at building a relationship with the very people whose your future product is in their hands. I don't think that's the way you conduct building a business for the long term. You're also going to lose the direct interaction with those sites associated with whether or not your drug fits the modalities for the practice of medicine in their regions around the world. Instead, you're going to homogenize it because it's a black box. I think we're losing a critical skill and a core competency of drug development when we completely outsource that capability. Mm-hmm. The more fundamental issue is for each company to determine what they think the core competencies of their business should be and how they wish to treat clinical development strategically.
Yeah. Interesting. It's the first time I've heard that take on it. You know, it's almost as if you're entrusting your brand, you know, first impression of your brand, no less, to a complete stranger, let's say. Although, you know, given all the talk about strategic relationships, I think a lot of people obviously would argue that there is a lot of there's a lot of simpatico, if you will, between the clinical providers, the CROs, and the sponsors these days. I don't know the extent to which that is or is not a truth, but I've heard it repeatedly.
So let's take it one step further.
Okay.
There are two other aspects of this. The first is quality. And there's no question that we can erect standards and metrics around quality that we measure. And the CROs are excellent at this. They have lots of experience and depth, and they can manage that well. Mm-hmm. But quality is more than just those metrics and the collection of those metrics. It also has to do with learning and understanding. And clinical research isn't just about we conduct a trial and it gives us a result. It's research. And research is about learning. So there's an aspect of quality here that involves being able to understand how things are really happening and translate that into the evolution of the study and the evolution of the program. Mm-hmm. And we often amend protocols because we've learned something during the course of the trial that's very important for the success of the therapy. If we work with a CRO, every time we amend, we have a cost hurdle. Mm-hmm. Now we've created a counterbalancing argument around the learning, and we've entrusted the quality aspects of the learning to a third party. Mm-hmm. As well-intentioned as the third party is, we've somehow lost something in the translation. It's sort of like every time you connect a device to another device, you lose a little signal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that little amount of signal is important in early development to understand more about the success or potential success of your product.
I would think very important.
The second piece is passion. Uh-huh. Okay? Mm-hmm. When people are running a clinical study, and I'm not meaning to denigrate the staff in CROs, mm-hmm. who I know work very hard and have a lot of passion. But when you are an employee, and when you have the opportunity to follow the molecule all the way through the phases of development, which is more difficult in an outsourced model, mm-hmm. which tends to focus on specific phases and the skills associated with those, the passion associated with the therapy and the passion associated with the potential value that brings to patients, I contend is different. And here's how it's different. It's Friday afternoon. I'm in my office. We've decided that we need different kinds of analyses done, and we need them by Monday. Now I have to get on the phone with my outsourcing partner and negotiate pricing around all of the work that has to happen. Or, in my insourced model, I pick up the phone and people do whatever it takes and do it well. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying the quality is different there, but the passion factor can make a difference. So if you put control, quality, and passion together, you have some fundamental, and knowledge building and learning, you have some fundamental concerns about whether outsourcing clinical development gives away a core competence of the company. And what I'm asking companies to do, and there are all sorts of providers here from niche through full service, mm-hmm. and sponsors to do, is think very carefully about what their strategic needs are mm-hmm. before they make a decision because they started to treat clinical development as a box they can outsource.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see. And how would you define then the optimal operating model for a pharmaceutical company?
So there is no optimal operating model because different companies are built around different strengths. Mm-hmm. Okay? So the DNA of one company and the DNA of another company may be quite different. Company A may have been built around a very strong discovery model. Company B may have been built around an in-licensing model. Mm-hmm. Company C may have been built around a sales and marketing capability. So it's up to the leadership in each company to understand that and to know where they want to go as an organization and strategically then design the process that best fits their organization. But what I'm concerned about is a sort of blanket philosophy or herd effect that says, gee, I can do it cheaper, you can do it better, let's outsource it, without really considering the implications of that within the context of the strengths of the company.
I was going to say, what are the implications of this approach for how to work with many of the companies represented here at Partnerships.
So let's take another industry as an example, okay? In the 1930s, 40s, and even the 50s, the movie industry was a fully integrated industry. So the script, the screen writers, the actors, even the theaters were all fully integrated. And these were large companies that controlled their output and their product. Now look at the movie industry today. The innovation rarely comes from within the company. It comes from the independents who bring scripts. The funding and the risk management comes through syndication of the film. And the movie companies today are largely sales and distribution companies, right? So, go into a movie theater and look at the opening, a film funded by, produced by a so-and-so film. There are, sometimes five or six entities involved in creating the outcome product. Yeah. And I worry if that's the future for the pharmaceutical industry. Because let's look at what's going on. Companies, instead of investing in discovery, instead of investing in innovation, are buying back their stock to prop up their PE ratios so that they can, or the dividends, so that they can continue to keep the PE ratios to satisfy the street short term. In other words, they haven't thought of a better use of their own money than to buy back their own stock. They're bringing in innovation through acquisition and deals with smaller companies, and they're outsourcing core competencies. So what will they become? Will the big pharmas largely become, like the movie companies have become, a shadow of themselves, where the core competence associated with their core business is really now distributed, and their primary role is financial engineering, regulatory approval processes, and sales and distribution? Or will companies continue to invest in themselves and redouble and double down their investment in innovation and focus on the core competencies that made that specific company great? That's the concern that I have, and that's really why I wanted to offer this perspective.
Well, I want to thank you for it. Ira, it's been a pleasure to have you. And I think you've given us quite a few nuggets to continue the debate, and I hope that we see a lot more of that, because it's not a position that you're hearing a lot of at an event like this, and probably worth discussing.
And it's not intended in any way to take away from the great capabilities of the many companies who are here, but just to offer a note of caution in the wind here as the trends continue for people to consider.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, this concludes our episode of Partnerships TV. Please stay tuned for future episodes. I'm Marc Dresner. Thanks for joining us.